Hey, welcome, friends. This is Steve Schlueter from NeverEndingReferrals. Hey, Barron's headline recently said in some of our major markets, it was time to rent. And I'm going, let's think just a second before we go. In fact, one of the things that we talk about constantly in NeverEndingReferrals is being the trusted advisor, going and taking that position of the person they count on to interpret the market. And let me share with you a few thoughts from Gary Keller's vision speech that he shared at Family Reunion, and how you can use some of his slides to maybe make a different case versus what some of the national pundits like Barron's might be saying. Maybe it's right in some of the major markets, but I think our consumer deserves to understand the full big picture before they make a decision to go rent in a market that might not be the right answer. So let's take a look at a few slides here on your screen, and let's maybe look at some different interpretations of what we might do with this. So let's take a look at this one: home prices annually. And take a look at what we see here. We've got this gold line, which is the long-term trend in real estate. And you notice now, after the Great Recession, we dropped dramatically below the trend. And in fact, we were below that trend so long, even as recently as 2020, that we were really questioning, is there a new trend line here? Are we ever going to get back to the long-term trend? Well, you notice in 21 we did, and we eclipsed it. Projected to go yet higher above the trend line in 2022. And so what does that mean? Does that mean our markets are overvalued? And yet I'm going to say yes, maybe, and that still doesn't mean you should go on the sideline and rent. And here's some thoughts around that. Where I'm at in San Antonio, Texas, for example, when you look at this trend line, it's our market's gotten to about a median price of the low 300s, and where we had been far below this national trend line for years and years. And the argument that I might make that we're not overpriced, we have just come in alignment with the national trend. For example, Texas is a place where people are migrating to from other parts of the country. We're attracting so much economic development, so many manufacturing, Tesla, automotive industry, high tech, semiconductor, that it's really quite feasible to make the argument that we have come in alignment with the long-term trend, and this is the way it's going to be going forward. Now, that's just one case that you might make. Now, let's take a look at another point right now, and that's with regard to mortgage rates. They had been end of the year right at 3%, and now they've bumped up a little bit. We're seeing 4.7, 4.9, and it's fluctuating up and down, and people are getting a little scared that that's high. And here's yet another slide that can provide some perspective. Now look at this trend line that we see here. The kind of the greenish trend line says 5.97%. And if we just go back to about 1990, it would suggest that kind of the normal trend would be around 6%. If we go longer back on the trend line, it suggests over 7.5, 7.75%. And so even if we might start bumping up around 5, we're still far below the long-term trend. And so what that might suggest, if you can get a mortgage locked in below this median or long-term trend line, especially below that 5.97%, that would be really a smart move. And yet let's take it a step further. Again, you're being the local real estate economist, the trusted advisor. It's about helping people make their own decisions. And I love this perspective right here. And let me walk you through this. Let's dig into this thing called affordability. And let's look at a car. Of course, we know cars have gotten crazy right now. And in 1989, a car was about $15,300. Adjusted for inflation, it ought to be about $36,000. It's running about 46. That's a real increase of about 30+%. Gas, well, we know what's going on there. It was 97 cents. Should be 2.25. Yeah, it's past 3.51 like it was at the end of the year. That was a real increase of 56% adjusted for inflation. Then we look at the real estate. Now, real estate, the house itself, really adjusted for inflation, should be about 218, and we're at 346, which is a real increase of 59%. Yet look at the mortgage. Now, this was before just our recent mortgage bumps, and yet adjusted for inflation, it would be the principal and interest would be 1915. It was 1455 on this 346.9 purchase. Now I got to assume the down payment and everything, right? And so it was a net reduced cost of the money of 24%. So when we think about the impact low interest rates are having, and that they are still below the median trend and the long-term trend, unless it was $1,900 principal and interest for that mortgage, that would be zero net cost increase. So there's an argument there that because of the cost of the money, if you're getting a mortgage for a home, it's still a great deal. And then all this at a time when wages have a net increase of almost 14% as well. So when you factor that in, and by the way, what the increase in wages has done and the decrease in real cost of the money is look at affordability. And this would say we probably still have some room in this market because the amount of gross income used to fund principal and interest has been running 14, 15, 13, 16% over the last dozen years or so, compared to a longer term trend closer to 20%. And so the cost of housing of the mortgage, especially when you consider income growth, is still rather affordable. And then the last trusted advisor point that I'm going to share with you today from these slides that might be some of the conversation points that you might choose to have in counseling a buyer or a seller about getting in the market, not getting in the market, building that home or not building that home, is this one: housing starts. And we had a crash after the Great Recession because we had a lot of economic factors that were out of whack, and we had excess inventory build up. And yet look at where we stand here. We've gone all these years of being below the trend line of 1 million housing starts a year, which is ideal. And after the Great Recession, this dramatic drop to as low as 400,000 home starts a year for several years, and then 500 and 600. Look at the deficit we're having to dig out of in terms of housing stock, just to have, get housing back to par. We're just starting to get above, as you can see at 2021, just starting to get above that trend line so that we can start to catch up. We've been continuing to build this deficit. And so that would suggest that we're probably going to have this upward pressure on prices because of low inventory, and that low inventory is going to be an issue for a while. And so there's some tips that hopefully you take out of this and help you be the trusted advisor and have those conversations that will empower your consumer to make really the best choice for them. Now, there are some markets that are extremely high price right now, and look at the trends in your market. What really is the longer term trend in your market, and where are you today? Where are the housing start situation? Where have they been versus historical? You can bring this hyper local, and yet this really paints a picture of when somebody like a Barron's goes out there and makes this big global statement that so many of these markets are grossly overpriced and you should rent. Maybe not. Let's educate the consumer, be a trusted guide, and let them make a great choice. What we know from all of this, though, is they're going to be in their home for a substantial amount of time. You really can't go wrong purchasing a great piece of real estate, not to mention the lifestyle, the security, the things that go with owning, that home. So I trust this has been helpful. Also, check us out on the 700 Challenge Facebook page, the 700 Challenge. We're on a mission to find 120,000 trusted advisors who will go adopt 700 households where you become their go-to person. And when we do this, we're going to render all those would-be industry disruptors who want to come in and disintermediate you and I in the real estate transaction, we'll render them useless, because the consumer wants an advisor who's going to help them interpret the market and make good decisions for them. And that's why we're here. All right, trust has been helpful. Also, check us out at NeverEndingReferrals.com. We're launching again here in mid-April, back at session 1 of taking folks through the 8 lessons of Never Ending Referrals. You can join our Never Ending Referrals community for $39 a month and get the 3 live webinars with Tammi, Juengst, and I a month. And we would love to have you, beside us and be beside you on that journey as we build our muscle as trusted advisors and really succeed through our relationships. Be well.